So I've dreamt of coming to this place since I was only 7 years old. Well, it took me about 47 years to realize that dream, and I can't believe that I'm actually here. This is one of the world's most remote inhabited islands, Rapa Nui in the native language, also known as Easter Island, Isla de Pascua, or Te Pito o Te Henua, the navel of the world. Easter Island is not an easy or a cheap place to get to. I mean, in a whole year, less than 100,000 visitors come here. That's about the same number of visitors as the Louvre gets in 3 days. In this video, I'll show you how to economically get to Rapa Nui, give some suggestions on how to keep your visit affordable once you're here, and show you the great things that make this such a uniquely special and amazing place. Say the words Easter Island and one image will come to mind. These, the almost 900 enigmatic, monumental stone statues called moai. So what's the deal? Rapa Nui was first discovered and settled by Polynesians around 800 years ago. They developed a thriving society with distinct religious and cultural practices. From the 13th to the 16th centuries, people constructed hundreds of moai statues, which are believed to represent deified ancestors. Gradually over time, the island's resources became depleted, partly due to extensive logging. And this deforestation, erosion, and lack of resources caused increasing internal conflict. A Dutch explorer was the first European to visit the island on Easter Sunday in 1722, giving it the name Easter Island. It was later visited by Spanish, French, and British explorers. European contact brought exploitation and deadly diseases, which along with internal conflicts and Peruvian slave raids, reduced the native population from thousands to only 100 people. In 1888, Chile annexed Easter Island, incorporating it into its territory, although technically it still remains part of the continent of Oceania. So fast forward to the late 20th century, and efforts to revive and preserve Rapa Nui culture seriously increased. The island became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and today the island's economy focuses on tourism, but in a way focused on preserving its archaeological and cultural heritage. So first, how do you get here? Well, unless you can figure out the impossible logistics of hopping on a cargo ship, or have your own ocean-going yacht, then you're going to fly. And there's only one option. So first you need to get to Santiago, Chile. Then you'll fly the 2,300 or so miles from Santiago on LATAM. If you try to price out flights from North America or Europe to Easter Island, you'll see they can be ridiculously expensive. However, hardly anyone flies there from North America or Europe without a stopover of at least a day or two en route. So you'll find that it's far cheaper to first price out your flight to Chile, then separately price out your flight from Santiago to Easter Island. So there's 2 reasons why. First, Santiago's airport is very well connected. A lot of airlines fly there, so there's a good chance you can find competitive prices or frequent flyer point tickets from your origin to Santiago. Second, if you do a Google flight search, you'll find that 2 prices appear for the exact same Santiago Easter Island flights. One with Chilean terms and regulations, one with regulations for whatever country you're searching from. But both prices are for the same flights at the same times on the same aircraft. To get the lower price, you just need to book it through the LATAM Chile Spanish language website and pay in Chilean pesos. So open a translate window, use a credit card without a foreign transaction fee, and book away. Now this is what I did, and I paid almost 300,000 Chilean pesos, which is about $320 round trip, instead of over 800 US dollars. So it used to be you could fly to Rapa Nui, rent a car, and do it all on your own. But COVID dramatically changed the regulations for entering and touring the island. When you're doing your research, please try to use information from post-2020 sources to maximize the accuracy. A few days before your flight to Easter Island, be sure to register beforehand at the website for the Chilean Interior Ministry. You'll need to input your passport number, flight details, and accommodation while on Easter Island. Once you submit it, you'll then receive an email confirmation almost immediately. At the Santiago Airport, there's a separate check-in area for the Easter Island flight. After they issue you a boarding pass, then you're going to proceed downstairs to go through passport control, even though it's technically a domestic flight. The agent we saw asked to see our registration confirmation. I'd brought printed copies and presented them. After a minute or so of typing, he printed out a form for each of us, stamped it, and we proceeded through security. We'd been expecting all of this to take a while, so it arrived at the airport 3 hours early, but there were no lines, and the whole process took us under 15 minutes. Now, once you're through the document checks and waiting for the flight to board, you might consider purchasing your Rapa Nui Park ticket in advance, so you won't need to go in person once you arrive. You'll need this to enter the vast majority of the sites on the island. Assuming you're not a Chilean citizen, the price is 72,000 Chilean pesos for adults, half price for kids 7 to 12, and free for kids under 7. The flight takes about 5 hours outbound and a little less than that on the return, and it's in a comfortable, wide-body Boeing 787. Your flight will land at the airport at Hanga Roa, which is the only town on the island. Fun fact, the airport has an extremely long runway, almost 3.5 kilometers, which was extended courtesy of NASA back in the 1980s in order to provide an emergency landing site for space shuttle missions. Now, there's a huge range of accommodations on Rapa Nui, from glamping tents and hostel dormitories all the way up to luxury all-inclusive boutique properties. So depending upon your preferences, you could pay anything from under $50 US up to thousands of dollars per person per night. But remember, you need to have advance reservations for your accommodation because of the pre-registration requirements. So I stayed here in a 2-bedroom bungalow at the Cabanas Moai for $130 US per night, which I had reserved online through booking.com. The place was great. It was super comfortable and homey and in a quiet area with only the odd rooster or barking dog to interrupt the silence. It was about a 15-minute walk to the heart of Hanga Roa, and it was especially nice to have the kitchenette and refrigerator, which allowed us to save a bit on meals and snacks. One particularly great thing about this place is it's only about a 2 or 3 minute walk from the Tahai ceremonial complex, which is the best place on the island to watch the sunset. Hanga Roa has everything you'd expect from a tourism-oriented island town. There's a few tourism agencies, places to rent vehicles, souvenir shops, markets, and restaurants, but it's also a real town that locals rely on for their day-to-day needs. Spanish was universally spoken, but many locals I encountered had a basic understanding of English as well. Although I would have preferred to stay for at least 5 days, because of our schedules, we could only stay in Rapa Nui for 48 hours. So here's how it all unfolded and what we saw and did. So after landing in the afternoon, we pretty much explored Hanga Roa on foot. Along the coast of Hanga Roa, there's a number of parks, sheltered swimming coves, restaurants, and even a few moai. We picked up a few souvenirs, hung out at the harbor and watched the sea turtles, relaxed at the place, and watched the sunset at Tahai. Now, you can't just walk around most of the national park sites without an official guide. So as a result, if you want to see most of the island, you'll need to book a tour. There's a ton of offerings on sites like Viator or Get Your Guide, but I didn't want to pay a premium for a private tour, so I used Mahina Tour, who was recommended to me by my guest house, and they offered a number of modestly priced small group tours. So on our only full day in Rapa Nui, we first headed up the volcanic crater of Ranukau, located close to Hanga Roa and the airport, to visit the ceremonial village of Orongo. This was a place of great importance in the history of Rapa Nui, since it was the start and end place for the Tangata Manu, or Birdman ritual, which had been developed to prevent warring between competing clans and instead rely upon a contest to determine the leader of the island for the next year. So each February, warriors from each clan would start at Orongo, scale down the steep cliff face, and swim out to the island of Motunui. Yes, same name as the island where Disney's Moana lived. This one actually exists though. Once they arrived at the island, they had to get an egg from the sooty terns that nested there, swim back, scale the cliff, and deliver the egg unbroken. Whomever did this first, their sponsor would be the king of the island for the next year, until the following contest. Next was a stop at the nearby unrestored Moai platform of Ahu Venapu. Pretty much all the Ahu platforms on Rapa Nui looked like this prior to 1960, when the first restorations started to take place. So a really interesting thing about this site, it has some very precise stonework on the base of the platform. Now, can you guess what this prompted some to theorize? Well, here's a very old photo of me visiting the Inca fortress of Sacsayhuaman in Cusco, Peru. See any similarities? So yes, some have suggested ancient Peruvian stonemasons actually sailed here and built Ahu Venapu. However, other than this resemblance, virtually no physical or genetic evidence indicates any Inca ever actually came to Rapa Nui. So after a break for lunch, we then went to the lava tube caves of Anatepahu, which is where whole villages of Rapa Nui people sheltered and lived during times of tribal warfare. It was super interesting going through the dark cave system. We next stopped at Ahu Akivi, which was a restored Moai platform away from the coast, and it was particularly beautiful in the late afternoon light. Our final stop was at Punapau, the quarry site for the pukau, which are the reddish stone top knot hats that many moai have. Our final day, because we were flying out in the early afternoon, there were no group tour options available. So we instead hired a local guide to take us to sites on the far side of the island, then drop us at the airport in time for our flight back to Santiago. Our guide, Lani, a local Rapa Nui woman, was super friendly and engaging. I learned so much about both the past and current life on Rapa Nui, and hanging out with her was definitely one of the highlights of our visit to the island. We started the day with a pre-dawn drive to Ahu Tangariki, which is the largest Ahu platform on the island, with 15 statues, including the largest ever erected on Rapa Nui, weighing in at over 86 tons. Now, all of the island's moai were pulled down during clan warfare in the late 1700s and early 1800s, and in 1960, the platform was struck and scattered by an earthquake-induced tsunami. It was later restored in the 1990s. And I must say, when we walked into the site at dawn, I was awestruck. It's definitely one of the most memorable and beautiful places I've ever watched a sunrise. Close to Ahu Tangariki is the quarry of Ranu Rakaru, where the stone for almost all the island's moai was sourced and carved. This place was magical. It was a completely unique and stunning setting. I had to keep reminding myself that it was actually real, since it almost seemed like Hollywood movie props. It's impossible to not be struck on just how massive and mysterious these moai are. As you walk around the pathway, you can see a record of moai design and carving processes, and your mind can't help but wonder how on earth did people using just Stone Age tools create this amazing place. I was awestruck. Now, Anakina Beach is where we finished the tour. This place is also otherworldly. I mean, have you ever been to a beach that has not one, but two moai platforms, and that's on top of the swaying palms, sandy beach, and sparkling clear South Pacific water? If we had another day in the island, I would definitely come back here, swim a bit, soak up some rays, and either bring a picnic or eat in one of the beachside restaurants. Because our flight was in the early afternoon, we didn't have enough time to hang out too long, but Lonnie recommended that we grab a Chilean-style hot dog from a local vendor at the beach before we headed to the airport. Good call. The charcoal grilled foot-long dog and bun, topped with tomatoes, guacamole, a bit of mayo, and some pickled vegetables. Amazing bargain for 4,000 Chilean pesos. So here's a few tips to keep you from blowing your budget on Rapa Nui. First, rewind back to about the 3-minute mark of this video and take my recommendations on how precisely to book your flights to Rapa Nui. Next, stay in affordable accommodations. If you want to splurge, you can definitely do it here, but it really isn't necessary. I mean, we got a comfortable standalone bungalow that slept 5 people, had its own kitchen, living space, a large shaded patio, and a sea view for $130 a night. I certainly don't need any more than that. Next, there's a few bakeries and markets in Hanga Roa, so you really don't need to go out to eat for every meal if you're trying to save a bit on food costs. Pick up some provisions, make your own breakfast, and consider taking a picnic during some of your daytime tours. And if you're really trying to save money, buy most of your groceries in Santiago and bring them in a checked bag. Food in Hanga Roa is naturally more expensive than that on the mainland. That's not to say that going out to eat is expensive. Restaurants in Hanga Roa aren't cheap, but they are pretty reasonably priced. You can get a great lunch or dinner for around 12 to 20,000 Chilean pesos per person. Especially if you're traveling alone or with just 1 or 2 persons, take group tours instead of private ones. I mentioned Mahina Tour, which we used. They run daily group tours to sites all over the island. So how can I really summarize and capture Rapa Nui? What a treasure. I went there with high hopes. I mean, it's supposed to be a tropical paradise with some cool and mysterious statues, right? But it was so much more. The people were gentle, warm, and welcoming. It wasn't spoiled or overrun by the decades of tourism, and the sights were gorgeous and mind-boggling. I loved everything about it. Of course, skeptics might ask, wait, you went all that way just to see some stone heads? Well, yes, I did, and I saw a lot of them. But Rapa Nui is so much more than just the moai. It's a people, it's a culture, an enduring mystery, and truly a unique and amazing place that'll evoke wonder in even some of the most hardened world travelers. In my decades of globetrotting, I've been to almost 100 nations, and I've never been to a place quite like Rapa Nui. There's very few places in this world that will leave you speechless, and Rapa Nui is one of them. I couldn't recommend it more highly. If you found this valuable, a like and subscribe is sincerely appreciated and helps me keep the channel going. Thanks for tuning in.